Hello, I'm here to tell you about a 2017 capstone young readers book called A Different Pond, written by Bao Fei and illustrated by T. Boyi. In the story A Different Pond, we begin early on a Saturday morning when a young boy is awoken by his father. As the boy and the father get ready, the boy realizes that he's awake even earlier than normal. The father has woken him up to take him on a fishing trip. But this is not the typical fishing trip most people would think of. Instead, the boy and his father go to fish, not for fun, but for sustenance. They need to catch fish so that they'll have dinner tonight. As the boy and their father to catch fish, the father tells the son about a different pond that he used to fish in with his brother back in Vietnam. See, the father has immigrated to the United States to get away from the Vietnam War. After the boy and the father bring home their fish, the father and the mother get ready to go to their second jobs. This book, A Different Pond by Bao Fei, discusses the dignity of poverty that comes sometimes when families immigrate from one country to another. Especially, the book specifically talks about immigrants that came to the United States after the Vietnam War. In it, the father, in order to provide for his family, not only works two jobs, but goes fishing, not just for fun, but in order to be able to provide sustenance for the family. The young boy sees how hard the father works, and from the father's hard work, learns what it means to provide for a family. This book highlights what it means to be an immigrant in the United States. Bao Fei's book highlights the reality of what it means to be an immigrant in the United States and the lengths that these immigrants will go to be able to provide for their family. Both the story and the illustrations in A Different Pond make this a must-have for any collection. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for a book trailer for A Different Pond. Hey guys, I'm here to tell you about a 2015 Scholastic book written by Alex Gino called George. This book is about a young child named George who was born a boy but deeply knows that she is a girl. While George knows this information, she has not shared it with anybody around her. When George's fourth grade English teacher announces that the class will be performing a play of Charlotte's Web, George knows that she is perfect for the role of Charlotte because she empathizes with the character's emotions and sensitivity. George, along with her best friend Kelly, rehearse for the parts, but when it comes time to audition, George's teacher, Miss Udell, refuses to let George try out for the role of Charlotte because Charlotte's a girl, and according to Miss Udell, George is a boy. When George's best friend Kelly lands the role of Charlotte, she and George devise a plan to allow him to also play the character one night. In George, Alex Gino creates a heartwarming story about a young girl ready to embrace who she is on the inside and show it to the outside world as well. Gino creates this story to help readers understand what it means to be young and transgendered, showing both the hardships of bullying and acceptance that transgendered youth face, as well as the emotional turmoil experienced by the child and the parents when finding out that their child is transgendered. Gino's book gives insight into the feelings of being someone different than the person others see you as, and it helps readers understand that gender dysphoria can be felt even at an early age. Books like George are extremely important in this day and age, as rules and regulations surrounding transgender equality are continually being questioned. George is both a sensitive and heartwarming take on what it means to be young and transgendered, and gives insight into the process of revealing who you are. There's another character in this book that I didn't tell you about. Her name is Melissa, but you'll have to pick up the book to find out more about her. Pick up Alex Gino's heartwarming juvenile fiction, George, to find out if George and Kelly's plan is actually successful, and to find out more information about the character Melissa. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hey guys, and welcome back. I'm here to tell you about a 2017 holiday house publication called Before She Was Harriet, written by Lisa Klein Ransom and illustrated by James Ransom. This book, Before She Was Harriet, is a biography about Harriet Tubman. However, this biography is done in reverse, beginning with Harriet Tubman as an elderly woman about to board a train. In the book, each page talks about who Harriet was before she was this woman. Before this moment, Harriet was a suffragist in the women's rights movement. She was a general during the Civil War, a Union spy, and a nurse. Before even these, she was a protector of her family and a conductor of the Underground Railroad, who changed her name along with her situation and the situation of many other slaves during the time period. Before she was a conductor of the Underground Railroad, she was Minty, a slave. And as a child, her name was Araminta, a young girl her father educated to read the stars and the landscape to know how to navigate through them. These teachings from her father would later guide her in rescuing so many African Americans from slavery. Oftentimes, historical figures can be relegated to becoming one-dimensional characters just seen in history books or discussed on specific days. But Klein Ransom's book gives readers a deeper understanding of who Harriet Tubman was. James Ransom's illustrations, each showing Harriet at a different stage in her life, capture the determination and strength of who she was. This book gives great insight into an important historical character, not only highlighting the role she played in the Underground Railroad, but showing that Harriet Tubman was much more than what we read about in the history books. She was not only the conductor of the Underground Railroad, but she was a fighter for freedom throughout every stage of her life. Before She Was Harriet by Lisa Klein Ransom can be paired in a classroom before watching the new movie depicting Harriet Tubman's life. This book is a great way to introduce just who Harriet Tubman was and to discuss the bigger roles she played in her life. Before She Was Harriet is a great read, especially before you go out and watch the movie Harriet. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for a book trailer about Before She Was Harriet.
We know her today as Harriet Tubman, but in her lifetime she was called by many names. As General Tubman, she was a Union spy. As Moses, she led hundreds to freedom on the Underground Railroad. As Minty, she was a slave whose spirit could not be broken. An evocative poem and iconographic animation come together to honor a woman of humble origins whose courage and compassion make her larger than life. Dreamscape presents Before She Was Harriet.
Hey guys, I'm here to tell you about an adventure read by Pablo Cartaya called The Epic Fail of Arturo Zamora. It's finally summer in Miami, and Arturo couldn't be more excited. He plans on hanging out with his friends and working for the first time in his family's restaurant. The summer, however, doesn't go the way that Arturo expects. For one, his mother's goddaughter Carmen is back in town, and she's nothing like Arturo remembers. There's also a new land developer in the neighborhood with his eyes on Arturo's family's restaurant. When the developer makes a bid for the land that Arturo's family's restaurant is on, Arturo knows he has to do something to save the restaurant. He sets off on an epic adventure to stop Wilfredo Pippo from destroying his family's restaurant and erecting a high-rise instead. He covertly gets information about what Wilfredo is doing. He gets up on a stage in front of thousands of people to protest Wilfredo's development, and he even gets arrested. Arturo's desperation to save the family restaurant is spurred on by his abuela's sickness and the history of the restaurant that he reads about in his abuelo's letters to him. Arturo starts to realize that the most important thing is family, and that no matter what happens, family supports each other. In the epic fail of Arturo Zamora, Pablo Cartaya shows just what it means to come from a large Latino family who supports each other no matter what, even though they might give each other a hard time. If you're looking for a funny, engaging book, this might just be a perfect read for you. Pick up the epic fail of Arturo Zamora today to find out, does Arturo actually save his family's restaurant? And what happens between him and Carmen? Thank you for watching. Hi guys, I'm here at my favorite library to talk to you today about Ghost Boys by Joel Parker Rhodes, published in 2018 by Little Brown and Company. In the book, Jerome, who's our main character, is a good kid, listens to his grandma, but is kind of awkward and picked on at school. One day he goes to school and he meets a boy named Carlos. When he and Carlos are in the bathroom eating lunch, a couple of other boys come in and start picking on them. Carlos pulls out a toy gun to scare the bullies away. While Jerome isn't really sure about the idea of having a gun, Carlos convinces Jerome to take home. On the way home, Jerome decides he's gonna play a little bit, and so he is playing with a toy gun in an abandoned lot when all of a sudden, a police officer comes and kills Jerome because he thinks that the gun might be real. Jerome then wakes up, but this time as a ghost. And he's really upset at the injustice of what has happened to him. And so throughout the book, we see Jerome watching his family and the grand jury proceedings to see if the cop is going to be punished for killing Jerome. As he's in the grand jury proceedings, he sees that the cop's daughter, Sarah, can actually see Jerome. And so Jerome starts to talk to Sarah, and he's very angry by the fact that her father shot him without ever talking to him or realizing that it was a toy gun. As Jerome talks to Sarah, he's visited by another ghost. This time, it's the ghost of Emmett Till, a boy who was lynched in the 1950s. And as Jerome and Emmett talk to Sarah, Sarah starts to realize that she has a very privileged life because of the color of her skin, where Jerome and Emmett have to deal with things because they're African American that Sarah doesn't because she's white. Emmett starts to help Jerome figure out how to get past his anger, and Sarah starts to see that instead of being the problem, she needs to do something to help bring awareness to what happens to Jerome and Emmett. You've got to read it to see what happens to the cop. Does he get punished for killing Jerome, or does he get off? Thanks for watching. I'm going to leave you with a wonderful book trailer made by Liz Friend at Frisco ISD. Hey there, I'm in my favorite library today to tell you about a 2015 Amulet book by Joseph Marshall called In the Footsteps of Crazy Horse. And in the footsteps of Crazy Horse, we have a young Lakota boy named Jimmy McLean, who is part of the Rosebud Sioux Indian Reservation. Jimmy McLean is Lakota, and Jimmy's at the end of his school year, and he's so ready for summer because Jimmy gets picked on at school because he doesn't look Lakota. He has light hair and blue eyes, and he has a last name that doesn't sound Lakota. Jimmy's grandfather, Niles High Eagle, decides he's going to take Jimmy on a road trip to retrace the path of Crazy Horse, one of the Lakota's most famous and heroic warriors. Jimmy and his grandfather Niles visit different historical sites important to Crazy Horse and the battles that he had. As they go from place to place, Niles talks to Jimmy about the different things that Crazy Horse did. Jimmy learns that Crazy Horse was also light-haired, even though he was Lakota. They stop at different historical sites where major instances in Lakota history had taken place. Jimmy's grandfather, Niles High Eagle, tells him the stories of Crazy Horse. One of the things that Jimmy never knew is that Crazy Horse didn't quite fit in either because of his light hair. But despite his differences, one thing that Jimmy learns was that Crazy Horse was brave. He led his people in defense against settler raids. He protected the children and the women who couldn't protect themselves. He was a fierce warrior, willing to defend his way of life and his people. But more importantly, he cared enough about the people. When he realized there was nothing else that he could do, he surrendered and allowed his people to live in peace at the end of his life. As Jimmy's grandfather tells him these stories, Jimmy starts to realize what it means to be Lakota, and he learns more and more from the bravery of Crazy Horse. In the Footsteps of Crazy Horse celebrates the oral traditions of Native American storytelling. This book not only honors the culture of the Lakota tribes, but it also teaches us the history of Crazy Horse and allows us to see a view that's not always talked about in the history books. I highly suggest reading In the Footsteps of Crazy Horse, one, to learn about all the amazing things that Crazy Horse did, and two, to see how these stories help Jimmy become brave. Thank you for watching. Hey guys, I'm in the young adult section of my favorite library to talk to you today about a 2018 HarperCollins book by Elizabeth Acevedo called The Poet-X. And The Poet-X is a book in verse, which means all poetry, about a young girl named Xiomara Batista. Xiomara is the daughter of Dominican immigrants living in the United States. Xiomara is early high school age. She's got a very beautiful, voluptuous figure that her religious and strict mother thinks might get her in trouble. Xiomara's parents restrict her freedom as a way of trying to protect her. But all Xiomara wants is to be able to express herself and to have a little bit of freedom to do the things that she wants to do and not always have to do everything that her mom tells her. Xiomara has a twin brother who is complete opposite of her. He follows the rules, he does what he's supposed to do, he's extremely smart and goes to a special school. And so Xiomara feels like she doesn't get the same allowances that her brother Xavier does. In order to gain a little bit of freedom, to be able to express herself where her mother doesn't let her, Xiomara writes poetry. She writes poetry about her family. As Xiomara's going through the book, she meets a boy named Eamon, and she knows that she's not supposed to have a boyfriend. But for the first time, she really feels like Eamon's somebody she can just be herself with. And so she starts sneaking around. And her brother Xavier and her best friend Caridad helps her cover up where she's been. But as always, when you sneak around, Xiomara gets caught. And her mother is furious. Xiomara is going against her religious teaching. She's being promiscuous, and so she punishes her. Xiomara has to kneel on rice. Despite the fact that Xiomara's mom takes away all of her privileges, Xiomara is still looking to be able to express herself. She decides to join the slam poetry club at school. For the first time, Xiomara really feels like people understand who she is, and she can express herself to more people than just Eamon, that she can tell people who she is and be accepted for it. Xiomara struggles to be part of this poetry club, to show people who she is, but also to talk to her mom. One day, Xiomara's mom finds her notebook of all of her poems about her life. She burns it. Xiomara struggles with her mother and struggles to be able to find her voice and make it be heard. I highly suggest The Poet X. It's a beautiful read. It also tells the story of the conflicts that can happen when immigrant families, where the parents were raised in one culture and the children are raised in a new culture, have conflicts that can make it hard for them to talk to each other. So I suggest that you read The Poet X to find out, will Xiomara be able to make up with her mom? Can she figure out how to make her voice heard? And now I'm gonna leave you with a book trailer created by Anna LaPrade.
The other girls called me conceited. Ho, thought, fast. When your body takes up more room than your voice, you are always the target of well-aimed rumors. Which is why I let my knuckles talk for me. Which is why I learned to shrug when my name is replaced with insults. I forced my skin just as thick as I am. The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. Xiomara Bastille lives in Harlem, and she doesn't feel as if she can ever be heard in her life. But she can't be hidden either. She grew into her body over the summer, but she doesn't like male attention, especially with her church-going mother over her shoulder. She finds an outlet for herself in the form of her school's poetry club, but she knows her mother would never accept it. Her mother would never accept a boyfriend either. My mother drops the word no like 100 grains of rice. I will kneel in these two. No cell phone, no lunch money, no afternoons off from church, no boys, no texting, no hanging out after school, no freedom, no time to myself, no getting out of confession with Father Sean this Sunday. Will she be able to heal her broken life before it falls apart even more?
Hey guys, I'm here to tell you today about one of my favorite graphic novels called Brazen, Rebel Ladies Who Rocked the World. It's written and illustrated by Penelope Baju, published by First Second in 2018. One of the greatest things about this graphic novel is that it's a compilation of nonfiction stories about rebel women throughout history. These stories are about women who challenged the status quo of their society, women who refused to take no for an answer and created their own paths to get the things that they wanted. They did not accept the things that were holding them back. This book discusses women who were faced with gender discrimination, who were ostracized because their physical characteristics were out of the norm, or who didn't necessarily want to follow the social hierarchy or rules of their time period. There's many names in here that you'll recognize, names like Josephine Baker or Margaret Hamilton, the Wicked Witch from the Wizard of Oz movie, singer Betty Davis, or even Temple Grandin. But there's many more stories of women that you might not have ever heard of. Some of my favorites were about bearded lady Clementine DeLay and how she carved a place for her in society despite the fact that she didn't look the way that everybody thought she should. There's also a story about Lozan, a female Apache warrior who rode with famous people like Geronimo in the fight against white settlers who were raiding their camps. Another amazing story is about Greek gynecologist Agnodice, who dressed like a man during the ancient Greek times after the Athenians banned female doctors in order to provide the medical care that her patients needed. Not only did Agnodice break the rules in order to do what was best for her patients, but she also fought against them to allow female doctors to be reinstated in the Greek government. Not only are there colorful panels discussing each of the characters in length, there's a beautiful color display that crosses 2 pages at the end of each chapter, highlighting the magnitude of the work each woman did. Brazen is an inspiring book for both men and women because it shows how women, despite the social barriers that have been in place throughout history, have pushed back in order to make a place for themselves in the world. This book is a great addition to any coffee table because it has such quick and easy but enlightening read. I personally keep my book on the nightstand in my guest room, which is why I had to use a digital book today, because everybody who reads it wants to borrow it. Brazen Rebel Ladies Who Rocked the World is a wonderful book to pick up. I think you're going to want it in print, but the digital is amazing as well. Thanks for tuning in.